Meta Eagle, more than just technology, Lee. And I'm looking forward to hearing what about how we can make IT simple this lunch. Good to have you with us.
Indeed, more than just technology. Indeed, thank you for having me on the show, Steve.
No problem at all. We look forward to it. So I've got lots of questions, and I know you're going to simplify IT for us very shortly. But just before we get into that, if this is your first time with us on this Lunch and Learn, it's great to have you with us. I can see we've got some participants logging in on our Zoom platform, but you may well also be listening to us on either Facebook Live or via LinkedIn video stream. If you're listening to us on those platforms, please do stick with us. Ask any questions of Lee or myself, and we'll do our very best to answer those. Or you may indeed be listening to us on YouTube later on in the evening after you watch Bojo at 7 o'clock. If that's the case, again, please do contact us with any questions, and we'll do our best to respond and connect with you. That's what we want to do this Lunch and Learn, is connect with business owners in Birmingham to help us all not just survive, but to thrive the challenging times we find ourselves in right now. So if you are, just give us a love, a like, and give us your contact details, and we'll respond and connect with you. If you are with us for the first time, Action Coach is a business coaching firm. We're not here to help you. We're not here to tell you how to do run your business directly. We're here to support you and encourage you and coach you along the way. But as I say, it's great to have Lee from Meta Eagle with us. Lee, how's your week been so far? I know it's only Monday lunchtime. It's the last week of February. How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, feeling positive. I think everyone's waiting in anticipation for the announcements that will come later on this evening. Indeed. Monday's been an incredibly busy Monday. They always tend to be. So already nipped out to see a client real quick, back to the office, going through a few things, some staff training, and reacted to a couple of things and helped a few people out. And it's the afternoon already. How about that?
Yeah, the day is storming by, isn't it? And it's just gone 12 o'clock, but it's been a productive morning for me too this morning. And I hope that both of us, Lee, we've had this conversation before. You and I know each other well, but in the world in which we both work, there's often times when we have what I call BFOs, and that's blinding flashes of the obvious. So things we've heard before and things we've both said or talked about before, but suddenly we realize, actually, yes, I can apply that in my business. Or maybe it's a case of, I need to get on with applying that in my business because I haven't got around to it yet. And so I hope that for our listeners this lunchtime, there may be one or two BFOs in your business, and tips and advice from Lee on how we can keep it simple. I guess, Lee, I mean, my opening gambit is, it's been almost 12 months now since we first went into lockdown, March last year. And it feels like we've not just covered 12 months, we've covered 10 years, a decade, in terms of how we've progressed in using IT and adapting our workplaces and working remotely. We're on Zoom now. I go back to January last year, January 2020. And before we knew lockdown was coming, and I said to my colleagues, they were talking about, do we do webinars online? I said, oh, no, I much prefer to do things face to face. And, as we all know, the world has been pushed forward in a different way. And I do think there is lots of more efficient ways, and it's woken us all up, hasn't it, to how we can make better use of the systems and technology that's around us.
It has indeed. I mean, and don't get me wrong, this lockdown and the pandemic has been devastating to a lot of industries, and there's a lot of hardship out there. But I'm a firm believer of taking positives from a negative situation. And one of the positives is that it has advanced us, I think, a decade ahead of where we were. Much like you said, Steve, last January, if I would have proposed a video call with someone or some sort of online learning, the majority of people perhaps would have given me a bit of a weird look. Now it's normal. It's normal to have those Teams meetings booked in Zoom or whatever platform you decide to use. And the positive there is the amount of time that it saves. You don't have to commute to wherever your customer may be and have that face-to-face meeting. It's as simple as clicking on a link, jumping on, having that conversation. I am old school, so I do like a good solid handshake and sitting across a table from someone. But appreciate that in the current climate, that's not something we've got the luxury of.
No, and I think, going forwards, we're not going back to how things were. There's going to be a new norm, and I think it is going to be that hybrid. I absolutely agree. There's a lot you can absorb. Myself visiting a client, I can see the workspace, I can meet the people as well as the client, their teams, their staff, and see how they're doing things. But I think there's a lot to be said for combining that with this, the online world we're now operating in. What I wouldn't recommend is trying to do a birthday party for 9-year-old twins on Zoom. That it reminded me of some of the board meetings in previous organisations I've been in, where everyone's talking at once and you're trying to identify.
I can imagine that's quite fun.
But I think there's lots of advantages for the way we're working now, and not just using online platforms, but the remote way we're all working. and I know you've got some things you can share and help us in terms of how we could make sure we've got the right systems and the right processes in place so that we're working in a safe and secure environment when we're, as I'm sure many of us are working from home. I called a national retailer the other day to talk about a return, and the young lady I spoke to was in her living room, and it sounded like she was at a disco actually, with the noise in the background. But everyone is working in strange environments right now, aren't they?
Indeed.
And so it's about making sure we make the best of that opportunity, and we need to see it as an opportunity to adapt our working processes. So I know, Lee, you've got a few things you just want to share with us.
Yeah. If I could, I've got a presentation. So, am I okay to share my screen?
You should be able to, I think. Yes,
Let's do that one.
And I guess just while you're doing that, Lee, what question to kick off from me to you is, if somebody's got a strong IT background or a technical background themselves, why would they bother, sort of getting or hiring an IT specialist? Can they do it themselves?
Do you know what? That is a very good question, and it's a very good question that I get asked quite frequently. And this is me being a typical guy and multitasking. So let's see if I can do that. And yeah, so in any business, right, that your business is there to function as a business. It's there to make money, and quite normally as a business owner, and I can be guilty of this myself sometimes, we fall into the crux of doing the business and not running the business. And we only last week actually, we were talking to a prospect where the gentleman that set the company up and put the IT in place, he's actually got really strong technical knowledge. But it was more of the case of it was dominating 3 hours of his day. And it's not what he should have been doing as managing director. He should have been going out and generating new sales leads and finding new prospect customers, not sort of sitting down and worrying about his IT security. So he was more than ample of doing it. But it's a question of, is that how you should be spending your time as a business owner?
I think, yeah, no, just to add to that, with all of my clients, I say, put a value on your head. Would you be paying somebody, would you expect to, the sort of money you would earn if you were working for somebody else, then to be doing the admin, doing the IT basics, etc., backing up systems, whatever it is you're doing? Or could you add more value to the business doing other, using your expertise and skills in a different way? So completely right.
This is it. And I think the other element there as well, Steve, is that yes, you might have some knowledge and you can probably find your way through it. But if you talk to a seasoned pro, then they're gonna know the best way to approach things. I mean, case in point, we use a HR consultancy company. We use an accountant. And yeah, I can sit down and understand company books and I can write employment contracts. But there's people out there in industry that have a better understanding of it than I, and therefore are able to do it quicker and make sure that it meets all the legislation that it needs to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my other, I'm BFOs in my own mind now, blindly flashing the obvious, but Lee, you wouldn't know this, but I used to work for an IT company myself, many years ago, sort of selling and installing networks into the education sector. And but technology moves so quickly, doesn't it? And I wouldn't dream of, the kind of network I was selling and installing 15 years ago is probably, it's all gone cloud-based, even, sort of month to month, new software, new ideas, new technologies becoming available. And so having a professional who's on top of their game is probably going to have the latest ideas, the latest technology, and the latest solutions available, as opposed to somebody who perhaps has an idea but not the latest information.
That's exactly right, and it's so important in IT.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what else do we need to be thinking about, Lee?
Right. Okay. Well, if I run through and we have a discussion on the presentation.
Absolutely.
So
start off. I was going to say, tell us a bit about you first. That's a good place to start.
It's always a good place to start, isn't it? So let me tell you about Meta Eagle to begin with. So we're an IT consultancy company, and we pride ourselves on bringing more than just technology to the table. Now, what that means is we take the time to understand your business, and we then look at your IT strategy and make sure it's aligned with where you want to be as a company. Yes, at the moment in the current climate, a lot of companies want to be able to work remotely. They want their staff to be able to work from home because that is a necessity. But there's always other elements for businesses that are important to them that may not be important elsewhere. I mean, some real world examples, we do some work with logistical companies that in the event that they can't print and ship labels, they're going to have trucks stuck in the yard or goods not going out to customers. So that is of the highest of importance. Retail, well, they might when they're open again. Let's hope that that's sometime soon. Wireless and PDQs and card readers connecting to the internet, that's obviously going to impede sales. So it's really important that we take that time to understand our customers and how we can deliver solutions that are going to be tailored fit to their needs. We offer a platform of solutions from many of the largest vendors. So you see a few of them on the screen there. So we're a Microsoft Cloud Solutions provider. We're partnered with the likes of Cisco, HP, Dell. So we've got those distribution channels and that knowledge, that specialized knowledge in terms of procuring and delivering hardware. We're very much about working from anywhere. And this is one thing that stood us well at the start of the pandemic and until now. One of our mottos is work hard from anywhere. So we leverage a lot of cloud technologies in order to be able to allow people to be able to do that. And also a big part of the business is support and monitoring. So we're an IT support company. We are an MSP. We do all the conventional monitoring of workstations and servers and backup. And we've got to make sure that we have the correct monitoring platforms in place to be able to identify problems proactively rather than being reactive.
Just out of interest, Lee, how do you see that last bit, support and monitoring? How's that changed with people working remotely from their own homes, perhaps using their own personal Wi-Fi, etc., or personal devices in some cases?
So it's changed in the sense that we've been quite somewhat more lenient in terms of what we're supporting. And normally we wouldn't have covered people's home devices and Wi-Fi and all that sort of stuff. But in the current pandemic, we know people are working from home and their home printer might be something very important to them. Their home wireless they need so they can connect to the internet and all the cloud services that go within. So we've been lenient on that. And also as well, there is still a need to monitor those networks at the corporate HQ. So you still got a lot of our clients still have servers and network infrastructure that is very important to those remote workers being able to work. So we've adapted and put various provisions in place to allow us to continue that monitoring, even though in some scenarios there's no one even in the building. The building's completely on lockdown.
Right. So yeah, real variety of sort of scenarios you find yourself in over the last 12 months, I guess.
It's been interesting. It's been an interesting 12 months.
Yeah, certainly. I guess it's certainly made the day-to-day job much more interesting, if not, and challenging.
It has. I suppose really we're lucky, and I consider myself fortunate to be in a business that we can continue to operate, because I know that not everyone's in that situation. It's been an incredibly busy 12 months for us, and more so just having that flexibility and that adaptability to help our clients to continue working.
Yeah, brilliant. Good.
Right. So in order to keep IT simple, there is 4 questions of which you can ask yourself in order to achieve, let's say, some inner IT zen. So I'm going to take you through these simple questions, and we're going to outline what they are and how they keep things simple. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a story. So President John F. Kennedy was visiting the NASA headquarters for the first time in 1961. While touring the facility, he introduced himself to a janitor who was mopping the floor and asked him what he did for NASA. The janitor replied, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." Now, I love that quote. And it's all about everyone working towards one common goal, having that vision and having that strategy that everyone can align themselves to.
Completely right. And we talk about that a lot with our clients and prospects here at Action Coach, that, having that clear vision of where you want to get to the top of the mountain is so important. You've got to have that and then work back from it and ensure that that's embedded across the whole organization. Whatever the role, whatever the individual's purpose of being part of that organization is, they need to know what that bigger vision is.
That's exactly right. And we all know that it's important to have goals and a vision and strategy in business. and everyone from the managing director or the owner of the company right down to the staff and those workers on the floor, they all need to be aware of what that vision is, because if they don't understand that vision, they're not going to be able to work towards it. And having an IT strategy is no different.
Yeah, and it's a bit like over the last 12 months, Lee, you know, everyone, whatever you do, whether you're a key worker, whether you're working from home, you know, whatever your role in society is, whatever your job and part you do, we all have the vision of beating COVID. And it's the same thing, isn't it? You know, we've all got that one single vision to beat COVID. So it doesn't matter how we do it, what we do, we're all playing our part.
Exactly that. So I've put some example visions on the screen, and completely appreciate for some businesses they may be different, but these are sort of the generic ones that we've seen in the last 12 months for obvious reasons. So we've got on there to be able to work from anywhere. Well, we're all in lockdown. We've all had to adapt the way that we work. Steve, I know that you've been working from home. I've been working from home quite a bit. I'm actually in the office today just because we've got a lot of kit being delivered. But if you can work from anywhere, you can work from home. So that could be a common goal that we're seeing a lot of businesses have to uptake. Also being able to work from any device. Now, one vision that we've had internally is that we don't want to be confined to having laptops or desktops. Effectively, I'm able to do my job from my phone or my tablet or my laptop or whatever device I have to hand. And that's been advantageous. I mean, yeah, it means that you can work pretty much any time. So you've got to sometimes be cautious of that and have that work-life balance, because that is important. Automating business processes. Now, it goes without saying that, especially in SMEs, time is the thing that people would want the most. If you could make more time, people would gladly have that. Well, automating your business processes effectively allows you to do that. We have some very repetitive tasks that we do here. I say we do in the loosest sense of the word, because a lot of them, we don't do them anymore. We've developed ways and systems so that they are automated. For example, building machines. We're able to procure machines, send them out, and they also build them themselves for our customers. So that's one of those repetitive tasks that we're able to alleviate ourselves from.
Many business owners I talk to, Lee, often say, even more so before lockdown, but even now, say, you know, short of time. And I talk about leveraging time. You know, how can you make better use of your time? And one of the key things is, you know, making better use of technology. You know, the two hand in hand. Technology can be such a great time saver. And the best story you talked about, John F. Kennedy's story. The one I was working with a client about 6-7 months ago, and we talked about leveraging time, and we're talking about steps in processing, about making a cup of tea, Lee. And how many steps do I make in a cup of tea? Any idea?
I know that's one of those questions that there are loads. I mean, until you sit down and actually think about it, it's underestimated, isn't it?
Yeah, we worked out, you know, on average, there's been about 150 steps to make a cup of tea. Anyway, this gentleman used technology to its best. And so, but he worked out how many cups of tea were being made in the organization a day. And eventually, they've invested in these tea making or refreshment making machines where you can order the drink from your computer. And it takes them straight to the coffee making or the beverage machine. And not only does that stop from a COVID point of view, people hanging around the coffee machine, but he worked out the amount of time it was saving in the business just by implementing, yes, not the cheapest probably, but most, in terms of look at the overall cost saving, it was by far the cheapest solution for the business. So technology can be such a great way of eliminating repetitive tasks and saving time in your business.
Indeed, and do you know what? It doesn't even have to be things that are overly technically complicated. I mean, an example for ourselves, which was about this time last year, actually, we noticed a lot of time was being spent in terms of following up invoices. And this wasn't because customers weren't paying or because they didn't have the funds to. They were just simply too busy. So invoices were overlooked, and time was spent on our side and the customer side in remedying that. And it led us down the path of, well, why don't we introduce direct debits? That way our customers don't need to worry about manually paying invoices anymore. We don't have to chase them. It was a bit of a win-win scenario. And that we worked out that it was saving about half a day a month. So that's half a day of someone's time that they could be doing something more productive. And it's just putting those steps into place, which really comes onto that last point there. is perhaps you want to leverage technology to get ahead of your competition, because you can bet your bottom dollar if you're not doing it, they're going to be doing it. So the technology is out there. It's just a case of sitting down and thinking about how to utilize it. And especially in the climate of now, more than anything, it needs to be done, because if not, other people will. It's as simple as that.
No, you make some great points. I think we could sit here and talk about this one slide for most of the lunch and learn, Lee, but I know you've got other ones to get through.
Indeed, indeed. Right. So the second point is, where is your data stored?
It looks
Now,
like Star Trek, one of the Star Trek films, Lee.
well, the picture on the right is one
Yeah.
of Microsoft's data centers. I think that one's in Israel, actually. And
Wow.
the picture on the left is a on-premise solution that myself and one of my colleagues built. Actually, I think that was probably last summer, I think, or summer before last we built that one. But what I wanted to sort of hone in this image, in this slide, is as business owners and directors and management, it's important to know and understand where your data's held. You don't necessarily need to understand the technical prospects of it, but a fundamental of understanding of where that data is crucial. Guidelines and legislation such as GDPR mean that we must be controlling and acting on relevant data in a safe and secure manner. With technology available today, it may exist in more than one place or on more than one platform. It may utilize the cloud. For example, Microsoft Azure is depicted in this data center. And a lot of people, there's a lot of stigma sort of around the cloud and not necessarily knowing what it means or where the data is. All it effectively is offsite somewhere. It's in someone else's data center. It's in someone else's infrastructure. You may have it exist on premise, like that picture on the left. That is one of many server cabs that sit in a server room, and it's physically there on site on this campus. Or you could have what's called a hybrid solution. So you may have some on-premise infrastructure, such as servers or application servers, for example, and you might have your email in something such as Microsoft 365. So therefore, your email is in the cloud, for want of a better term, and your servers are on premise. So it is possible to have that hybrid scenario. And there is situations in each that would dictate what one you would go for. And this is where it comes into play of having an IT company that understand these technologies and that are able to talk you through them in a personable manner, so you can understand what is the best fit for the business.
Brilliant. I've got a question from Jason, but just before I go to that, Jason, I'll come to your question. If you've just joined us, we've got Lee Robinson from Meta Eagle, keeping IT simple. And we're just talking about how we can use IT and make sure we've got IT strategies implemented in the best way in our business. So we're just talking about cloud storage. So a question from Jason, in terms of cloud storage, Lee, how can he truly make sure that is secure? What should he be looking out for in terms of cloud security?
Okay, so when you're going to look to store your data anywhere, storing it in the cloud is no different from normal, in terms of you want to do your due diligence on that product or that service or that provider to make sure that they are legitimate. So there is quite a few different accreditations, one of which, for example, ISO 27001. I'm not going to bore everyone on this call with the details, but it's in the public domain. You can Google ISO 27001, and it gives you a whole bunch of guidelines and attributes that you need to be able to meet in order to be issued that accreditation. So a lot of data centers out there, that is the highest gold standard that they will aim for. If you're going for one of the big players, say for example, Microsoft, Azure, Amazon AWS, Google Workspace, you know that they're going to be secure. But what is important is that when you start that project off, you engage with a competent IT provider that will work with you to make sure that your data is stored in the correct way. And by that, I mean, if we take Microsoft 365 and Azure as an example, there's many different areas globally that you can put that data. And depending on where or how that company operates, that might dictate where that data needs to be. And by that, I mean there's data centers in London, there's data centers in North America, and they're spread globally. But we've got some customers that work with US partners and US software. So by law, they have to have their data in the US. If we were to create that environment in the London data center, well, that's no good to them. They're in breach of that agreement. So it's taking the time to have someone start that journey with you and make sure that you're meeting all the obligations that you need to.
And just to reflecting on my own experience in public sector, so a number of years ago, Lee, when I was contracting services out from other organizations, one of the key things I had to check is where their data was stored, because if it is in other countries, it doesn't necessarily meet the legislation required, certainly in the public sector in the UK. But having said that, my knowledge is a few years out of date. So going back to what I said at the beginning, we need to make sure we've got up-to-date knowledge. But
well, on that point, you're exactly right, Steve. I mean, especially with the introduction of the whole GDPR policy that came in, and yeah, there was always a governance of data in the Data Protection Act, but GDPR further enforced that. And there's certain things as a UK business you have to adhere to that you wouldn't if you was in the US, and vice versa. So it's just making sure that when you're in the planning stage of this data migration and using a cloud platform, that you engage in these discussions, and that's part of the thought process.
Yeah, so just do your due diligence, asking the right questions, and if you're not sure what questions to ask, get in touch with Lee. There's another plug for you, Lee.
Indeed, always happy to pick up the phone and have a conversation. It's never too much trouble at all. Right. So the next point that I want to hit home is, how is your data secured? Now, this is really important, because knowing where your data is and knowing how your data is secured, you'd think logically would then mean that you are protecting yourself as best you can do against any form of data breach. And I think people assume that data breaches are going to happen to big companies, big corporates, or state level attacks. Trust me, it affects SMEs, it affects businesses that have just started up, one-man bands, large corporates, and everywhere in between. Like, this is something that we all need to be paying attention to. And a little bit off piece, but I've just started listening to a podcast actually called Into the Grey Zone. It's produced by a reporter, Deborah Haynes from Sky. And it's really interesting. Like, if you want to have a consideration and a listen as to sort of things that get breached, then I really recommend that podcast. But going back to this slide, you need to be considering in terms of your security is password policies. What password policies do you have in place? How are the passwords stored? How often are they changed? What is the process when someone leaves your organization in terms of restricting and locking down those passwords, or changing them so said employee no longer has access? Two form factors.
Just on that point, I think it's often a challenge for small business owners, but generally, when you have an employee who's also deemed as a close friend, or an employee who's you've built that friendship up with, it can seem harsh cutting them off when they leave an organization. But I think it's important for your own business integrity to make sure you do that to protect you and as a business owner and the employee. Is that fair to say, Lee?
It is incredibly fair to say. I mean, before I started at Meta Eagle, I was working for another IT company, and I left on incredibly good terms, but I knew the moment I walked out the door that all my passwords and access would be revoked. And that's exactly the way that it should be. One from the business's point of view, they know that they're staying safe and secure, but also from my point of view as well. If I didn't have access to anything, there couldn't be any questions or ambiguity of, oh, did Lee maybe do this, or have they accessed that? So it's fair to both parties. At the end of the day, business is business. And if someone leaves, they don't need to have access to the systems anymore, unless something's been negotiated that they need to stay on in a consultancy role or something. But the majority of the time, they don't need to have access. So that needs to be revoked. And in order to do that, you need to have a good list and documentation of what they have access to. So it's incredibly important.
just before you go on, great point, Lee. We're just being asked if you can repeat the name of the podcast that you've been listening to, just so we can tag it in our.
Yeah, of course. So the podcast is Into the Grey Zone. It's produced by Deborah Haynes from Sky. I think they're on episode 6 or 7 at the moment. So it's an ongoing one. It's released every week.
Yeah, brilliant. So people can go back and start from the beginning, I presume, or start from this week's episode.
Yeah, a couple of them are linked, so I would recommend listening from the beginning.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lee.
No problem. So another way and thought of consideration in terms of data is what's referred to as 2FA, or two-factor authentication. So that is, simply put, you've got 2 methods of authenticating. Now, we're all familiar with having a username and a password to access a system or a website. Well, 2FA introduces another element of authentication, and you could use a token such as a hardware token, or something as similar as and familiar as a phone. So all of our systems, we've got at least 2FA on them. So for me to log into a system, I need to have my username and password, and I also need to have access to my mobile phone to then authorize that access. And what that means is, if in the event my password is ever breached and someone gains access to my logon information, well, they also need to have my phone. And in our scenario as well, we lock a lot of stuff down to IP. So they need to be in my office, have my username and password, and have access to my phone, which is well, it's not going to happen. It's as simple as that. But it's about keeping those steps in place to make yourself less of an attractive target. Now, it's common knowledge in the tech community that a lot of people, it is human nature, use the same passwords. And you may well see these breaches that occur. I'm going to stem from naming any particular brands, but there have been some big data breaches in the news as of recent years. And these passwords are basically dumped onto the internet, where anyone can find them and anyone can really unhash them. It's a really simple process to do. And people then try those credentials against other accounts because it's human nature. We use the same password. It's easy. Well, one, don't use the same password everywhere and employ something such as a password manager. And 2, have 2FA in place, because that's going to stop that from happening.
I guess the most common form of 2FA, two-factor authentication, is any of us who do online banking will be asked for a PIN number, a randomized PIN number, either via our phone or via a little handset, a little PINs reader, as we call them with my bank. But that is, in its simplest form, two-factor authentication, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. So one of these hardware tokens, where you need to put your card in, you need to enter your PIN and put in the information. That is a form of 2FA. Yeah. So we do it with our banking. Why wouldn't we do it with our crucial IT systems as well? It makes complete sense. So we've covered passwords, we've covered the policies and 2FA.
Just before you go on, I've got a question on passwords from Sarah, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
On her mobile phone, all her passwords are stored within the phone itself. I think most of us are familiar with that. Is that still secure, she's asking?
No, I wouldn't advocate doing that. I would use a dedicated password manager. So one that's relatively inexpensive is Lastpass. So if you go to lastpass.com, you can sign up for an account there, and you can also enable 2FA, so you can use your phone to log in as well as your username and password. I mean, if you store passwords in your phone, it's only as secure as your phone. If you leave your phone somewhere and you've got a 4-digit PIN that happens to be your birth year, and someone just accesses your phones, well, are they then going to be able to access your passwords? Okay, some people might do something a bit logical in terms of hiding them, maybe have secret contacts where the passwords are the phone numbers and they put it backwards, but then it's just overcomplicating things, right? So I'd move towards a dedicated tool.
Yeah, I think Sarah was referring to sort of an automated saving on the phone, where it automatically saves.
So you mean, for example, on an iPhone, where you can generate a password, you can save, and it ties to your keychain? Yeah,
Yes.
that's a great way of using different passwords and using complex passwords. So sorry if I misunderstood the question there.
No. The question, your understanding is only as good as by the way I put it across, Lee. So don't you apologize at all. And I'm trying to decipher.
We've
So thank you for that.
we've
We got there in
answered
the end.
both scenarios between
Yes,
us, so that's always good.
we like to be thorough on Lunch and Learn.
Indeed. So yeah, the last point is that you've got your password secure, you've got a password policy, you're using two-factor authentication, but what are you doing to protect your endpoints? And by endpoints, I mean workstations, I mean phones, servers. These all need to be protected, so they need to be patched and kept up to date. So security vulnerabilities are identified on a daily basis. They're patched by the big providers. It's important that we're installing those updates onto our machines, so we're mitigating against that sort of threat. A key example, there is still a lot of machines out there that have Windows XP and Server 2008. Well, unless you're NHS or DoD or MOD, you're not getting any security updates for them. So they need to go. Your security is often going to be as strong as your weakest link. So you need to make sure that these devices also as well, in addition to being patched, have a form of antivirus on there. We all know what antivirus is and what antivirus does. We all know why it's important. And there's a common misconception that some machines aren't susceptible to viruses. Every machine is susceptible to a virus. It's just more so the hackers will look at a return on investment and design things and threats and exploitations for the majority of the machines that are out there, which tend to be Windows. But there's other things that we can do coupled with antivirus. A big thing on the market at the moment in the cybersecurity space is endpoint detection. So what this is effectively a sentient AI that sits on the machines and workstations, and it analyzes the traffic that's being used and how that machine's being used. And therefore, if it detects something that is abnormal, it will flag it. And that protects you against things such as zero-day exploits, where perhaps the antivirus providers haven't had an opportunity to update their threat definitions. It also allows for greater protection to things such as the crypto locker viruses that we've seen in the last couple of years. Case in point, in 2017, where the Locky ransomware was around, and the encryption on God knows how many machines globally, and the crypto locker viruses that even the NHS saw. It's all about thinking about how we're going to protect these endpoints and mitigate any sort of threat that may be against us, which ties directly into your monitoring. If you're not monitoring your endpoints in your network, then you can't see if there's an issue, right? I mean, it's as simple as that. So we're very big about being proactive and making sure we're monitoring environments and detecting problems before it's an issue. And your network security is no different to that either. You should be monitoring your network devices. You should be making sure your firewalls are patched and kept up to date, and that the policies are reviewed on those devices so they're kept as secure as they can possibly be.
Absolutely right. And just while we're talking about policies, Lee, I can hear Claire Laughton, who's one of our other regular Lunch and Learn guests, from an HR perspective, just in the back of my head, screaming policies. I think the other point I would just add to what you've said, everything you say is correct, of course. It's just to make sure from an HR perspective, you do update your policies. And you say technology is moving so fast. We need to make sure that our policies in our organization reflect our current practice, and that all your staff are aware of those policies, because when things do go wrong, that's usually the first port of call. Are you following up the policy? And you say on there how often they changed, just making sure that you are updating them from a HR perspective and that all the staff are fully aware.
That is so true. And the reason why I'm smiling is we've literally had the same conversation today, in that we're currently doing some work and the tasks aren't overly complex. However, we've been updating the policies to reflect it. So therefore there is that written documentation and that account of this is how you do it. And it is important to have the working policies and the HR policies updated to reflect that, because if you're not giving your staff the correct tools to do the job, then you can't expect them to do the high level job that you want them to do.
No, absolutely right. So it is just making sure that you're seeing IT from not just the hardware and the software, but from every aspect of the business, and making sure that everybody in the business is fully up to speed.
Yep, it's very important, very important. So just a real quick one on this slide here. So just a couple of stats for you in terms of data breaches and how they've occurred. So you see right at the top of the list, we've got weak and stolen credentials. That ties into the password management and policies and how you can help counteract that. Hacking is a very broad term. It can encompass a lot of things, but effectively gaining unlawful access to a system that you shouldn't do, and that could be through very easy ways and password breaches and gaining that information and applying that intel that you have. As you can see, malware is a big aspect of breaches, and that is where a malicious link or a piece of software enters your network, whether it's through email or some form of media like a USB stick is clicked on. And a lot of it as well is social breaches. One thing we're big on here is that people only have access to the credentials and information systems that they need to, not because we like to be really stingy. It's that deniability where if someone can't have access to a system, then they can't do anything wrong on it. And if they don't need to have access to it, then why do they have access to it? So we're very regimented internally and also making sure our customers are the same.
Absolutely. It's so important, isn't it, just to make sure that everything's up to date.
Indeed. So the last slide, you'll be glad to hear, is
what's going on here.
Yeah, it's pretty dramatic, isn't it? So
absolutely.
The final question is, what is the contingency and disaster recovery plan? And this slide and the plume of smoke is somewhere that I used to work. So those of us.
No wonder you left, Lee. No wonder you left.
Yeah, there's no association. I promise. So the picture there is the Bunsfield Oil Depot explosion, which happened in the early 2000s. So I didn't work at Bunsfield. I worked at a transportation company that was quite literally across the street, and you can't see it there because it is in that big ball of flames. Luckily, most importantly, no one was hurt and injured. The explosion was at silly o'clock in the morning, and there was no one around. Thank God. But what I wanted to sort of pay homage to there is that through no fault of our own and the company that I worked for at the time, the entire business premise was wiped out. We left work on the Friday. It was a normal Friday. I think we even finished a little bit early. This explosion happened at the weekend, and Monday morning, there was no company. We couldn't even get to the site where the servers were. The server room was flattened. It didn't exist. But obviously the business needed to continue and rebuild, not just physically in terms of all of its assets and warehousing and everything else, but all of its data, everything from the suppliers and distributors that we work with to customers to HR information and records. It was all in an IT system. And thankfully, there was a very regimented disaster recovery process in place in terms of how often all the information was backed up, the fact that it had to be kept off-site as well as on-site. And I'm talking 20 years ago now, where keeping data off-site was someone would put it on a tape, a magnetic tape, and put it in a briefcase and take it home for the weekend, which luckily happened in that scenario. But nowadays, fast forward to 2021, we can automate all of this, and it comes down to working smarter again. So we have a backup solution that we offer, Meta Backup, which not only automates the backup every day, it allows us to monitor it as well, and it also encrypts the data and keeps it at a secure off-site location. So therefore, in the event, if something was to happen to a customer's server, well, the first instance will restore to the local backups that are there on site. If in the event, i.e. case in point, the Bunsfield Oil Depot, where there is no site and we need to fall back to a disaster recovery plan, then we're able to do that. And what is really important is, irrespective of any sort of backup that you use, is to make sure that one, it's tested, and two, there's a plan to implement it. As you know, Steve, no plan survives first contact. So it might not even be something as devastating as an explosion, but say, for example, going back to crypto locker viruses, if all of your data was encrypted, well, what's the plan to get it back? If that server failed from a hardware problem or a leak in the server room, and you was to lose that server, what is the plan to get that data back? And testing is crucial. And we've even managed to automate testing that we can do. We've got clients that have very sensitive servers and very crucial servers that they need to know are going to work if we need to do a restore from a backup. And we're able to build our system so it will spin up the machines, the servers in a data center, power them up, test them, make sure they work, and send us a report and an email with the information that's been tested. So a DR, a disaster recovery plan, is key.
Question from Simon. He uses the word proportionate, which is an interesting phrase. So, what is proportionate in terms of how often should you back up your data? Is it something that you would recommend doing every single day? Is it once a week, once a month? I don't think I'm not going to be able to push you beyond once a month. I know that, but what is proportionate and what is sensible in terms of data backup?
So by default, out the box, we recommend once a day. And what we do is what's called an incremental backup. So let's say, for example, Steve, we're going to back up your laptop. Well, we're not going to back up your laptop in its entirety every day, because we're just going to be copying loads of data constantly. We're going to back up the changes, the files that have been changed. So there's no reason not to do a backup multiple times a day, because it's not really going to be that much data, the odd Word document, spreadsheet, or PDF that you've downloaded, or whatever it may be. So I would say that you want to be backing your machine up at least once a day. Your servers, you want to be backing up multiple times a day. But part of that disaster recovery plan is to sit down and to look at the business impact of, okay, if we lost data that was older than a day, what is the implication? Well, as a business, you might be securing new contracts that are worth millions, and it's key information that you cannot afford to be without. So the business situation and demand does dictate, but I would say at least every day. I back my laptop every day, because if I lost a day's work, it would be very inconvenient.
The BFO, I talked at the beginning of this webinar about BFOs, Lee, and I think the BFO for me, I've just pulled out of my desk drawer. You can't see it, but my hard disk that perhaps I haven't used as recently as I should. And as soon as we finish this, I shall certainly be going to back up my laptop, because I have personal stuff on there which isn't backed up by the business. So I think it is important to make sure, on a personal level as well, we've all got documents of all kinds. We want to make sure from a personal level we're backed up as well as a business level.
So, well, this is it. And ideally, if we can automate it so it's backed up, you don't need to think about it, and it's monitored and made sure that the backups are working, then even better. And do you know what? I think backup is nowhere near as expensive as some people suspect that it might be. And it's definitely something that you're thankful for in the event that you need it. Exactly like insurance. We all pay car insurance, and I drove my car this morning, and yes, I didn't have an accident and I didn't need my insurance per se. But if I did have a fender bender, I'd be happy that I had it, because my car is crucial to me and what I do.
And as we all know, over the last 12 months, we never know when a virus is around the corner, whether it's a technological virus or anything else. It's important to make sure we protect ourselves and get that that protection on our hardware.
Indeed. Right. So other than that, in terms of if any of you have any questions, you would like to discuss any more points in more detail, or would just like a friendly IT chat with a company that would explain it to you in a personable level and assess what you need as a business, there's my details and our details on the screen. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn or reach out via email. It's always good to have that social footprint.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lee. Another question is just coming from Jason, just while we've got you here. He's asking about the hardware. I'm just going to put your details on the screen now. How often should somebody think about replacing, a business owner think about replacing their hardware in the business? He says his machines age one between 4 and 6 years.
So It all depends on how that machine was spec'd. And for example, I mean, when you bought it, if you went way over the odds on what you need and kitted it all out, then chances are you can get quite a lot of longevity from it. When we spec systems out for our clients, we do it with the idea that it's going to last 5 years. So it's not necessarily what they need now, it's what they need in 5 years. I mean, the performance and hardware capability of machines is exponential. It's on a curve, and we've all heard of Moore's law and the fact that processing power will double every 18 months. You don't quite need to go that crazy, but similar to any other asset that you would keep in the business, you know, you'd want to keep that asset for 5 years. You could buy a new laptop, or you could buy, I don't know, a drinks fountain. It's going to get written off after those 5 years, and you should be definitely looking to replace them, or at least thinking about that timeline when you get to 5 years or above. But it does depend on the system that you've got. Some people go a little bit crazy and buy really top ends, and they manage to stretch that to 7 years or so. But yeah, 5 years is time to start thinking about it, I would say.
So some of those machines, Jason, may be at a stage where you want to give Jason a call, Lee a call. Yeah, my name's mixed up now. Give Lee a call. If it's Lee, just out of interest, I know I know you because you know through our networking. I know you do a lot with Apple products. Do you deal with both Apple and Microsoft?
Yeah. So the majority of the market out there is Microsoft. So servers, workstations, yeah, we do all of that. We are an Apple business partner as well. And this is because we have some design customers that have to be very specific Macs that they have to use. But in terms of Windows machines and procurement, we can do all of that. We can also, as well, what we do for our support customers is we build the machines and we deploy them. So you don't necessarily have to worry about the time that it's going to take to do all that. It's what we do in-house. The machines rock up to site, delivered, all good to go for those particular users.
Brilliant. Yes, I knew you were an Apple business partner, and I thought, but I just want to double check for the benefit of our listeners that you were happy to work in both environments. So,
yeah, and we're partnered with Dell, HP. We can provide everything from 5 laptops to a huge server array and shared storage and networking capability. We've got experience with all of it, from large corporate to you know, half a dozen machines.
Good. Well, I wait for the day when you and I are allowed to meet in person, Lee, because I have a Dell machine here that needs some TLC. So I shall be bringing it into your office for a bit of a chat. But
I'm sure I could get someone on it for you, Steve.
But it has been really helpful, not just to me, but to all our listeners, and some really useful, poignant reminders of the things, you know, those simple tasks that we need to make sure we have in place for our business. Everything from backing up, password management, the policies in the business, and having that clear vision, I think, is so important right now, Lee, of where do we want our IT to be in 5 years' time? You know, how do we want to be using IT in our business in 5 years' time? And start that process now with the equipment you're buying this week, this year in your business. Have that long-term plan in place. It's so important, isn't it? Just to make sure we're not just, you know, randomly buying equipment or using equipment, but we've got a plan in place of how it's going to look further down the road.
Indeed. You know, as business owners, we've all got a plan of where we want to see the business in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now. And we need to make sure that our IT strategy is aligned to enable us to do that, because technology in an organization is so important, especially in today's climate.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, get the right IT strategy. You know, as we said earlier on, helps with your time management. It can help with your sales strategy, help with your marketing, you know, websites, you know, social media, all of it ties and comes back and ties into your IT strategy. So really important. But thank you, Lee, for those simple and really provocative thoughts and conversation we've had today about how we can improve the IT in our business. And most of all, keep it simple, taking the fear away. Those often, you know, it's one of those areas that people, a bit like finance, people sort of stay away from. They're worried about getting it wrong and doing things wrong. If you're in that position, I can't recommend Lee highly enough. You know, do pick up the phone. I know that Lee will be happy to have a, you know, just an informal chat to see how we can support you and if there's an opportunity for you to work together going forwards. Is that fair to say, Lee?
That is very fair to say, and thank you very much for the recommendation as well, Steve.
No problem at all. And if you have got wider areas of business you want to talk about. Maybe it is the marketing, the time management, or you want to have a bit of a business plan pulled together for your business to know where you're going to be in 5 years' time. I would love to have a conversation with you as well. I may well signpost you to Lee and other contacts we have, but we have some great knowledge in our business here at Action Coach to help business owners not just survive, but thrive long into the future. And the starting point, if you're struggling with time right now, is perhaps just take 30 years of experience and spend 30 minutes a day, just half an hour a day, working on your business. Working out how your business is going to survive and thrive into the future, and coming up with some clear ideas, maybe around your marketing, maybe around your team management or team plan. And I had a great session with a client the other day, just mapping out the structure of the organization in 5 years' time. What a fun and useful exercise to do. But it's all about working on your business and not working in it. And we've got a great product called our 30X program, which is just £30 a week with no contract. So if you can do it in a week, and actually if you did, I have one client who's done all 30 videos in a week. He had a week off work and just blasted his way through it. I would recommend spending a bit longer than that, actually putting into practice what you're learning, but the content is there for you to use. If you're interested, please do give me a call. Again, I'd love to have a conversation with you about our 30X. But for now, we've got 3 minutes left. So I just again want to say thank you to Lee for joining us. It's been great to have you with us, Lee. Getting the most out of your IT it's been really good. And, we look forward to next time. I think next time you're going to come and join us, you're going to talk a bit more about your business journey yourself and what you've been doing over the last 12 months and how you've grown your business.
Yeah, indeed. So I think the next talk that we've got scheduled is sort of taking a step away from the technology side and focusing more on the business side. We're a relatively new company. We incorporated in 2017. Myself and my business partner have got years and years of experience of 20 years apiece, so 40 something years between the two of us, us two founders. And the last year's been very exciting. I mean, I left my full-time employment this time last year to then leave, an employed job that I was really good at, to then roll the dice and start a business full-time during a pandemic was quite scary. So just really sort of offering up some of my thoughts and some of my experiences over the past year.
Brilliant. And so you're back with us on the 10th of March to talk about your first year in business in a pandemic. So we look forward to absolutely hearing about your journey, what got you to that point, and what, how you've got through the last year and what you've done during the last year in your business. So really look forward to hearing from you again and meeting with you again, Lee, on the 10th of March. This Wednesday, I refer back to earlier in the conversation to Claire Laughton, an HR expert. She's joined us a number of times, giving us great advice. Last time she was with us talking about the vaccine and how we could, what should we be doing in the workplace in terms of the vaccine. But this Wednesday, she's talking about her business journey and how she has survived the pandemic, and not just survived, but thrived, and how she's pivoted a business and her business journey to date. So this Wednesday, Claire Laughton, 12 o'clock. And then we look forward to seeing Lee again on the 10th of March, talking about his key business journey. Because what we're doing here at Lunch and Learn is not only giving you advice, support, guidance, and educational slots, but also talking to local business owners about their journey. And we love to hear how they've changed and what they've learned from the last 12 months. So Lee, once again, thank you so much for being with us this lunchtime. And we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time. But for now, stay well, stay safe, and we will see you very, very soon.
Thanks a lot for having me on the show, and thank you to everyone that's given up their lunchtime to hear me speak. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Lee, and stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Take care now. Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.